Welcome back to the morning show here on Horizon News. Now, businesses have expressed support for the federal government's extension of the border closure to January 2020. Business leaders within the country and other stakeholders too expressed this support for their decision to extend the closure of all of the country's land borders to their neighbors by the date that they've chosen of January 31st, 2020. Now, the Nigerian Association of Chamber and Commerce, Industry, Mines and Agriculture, NASIMA, and the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria as well, commended the federal government, saying that it's an indication that the federal government has the progress of Nigerian business communities at their hearts, or at the center of their hearts. Now, as they were reacting to the approval that was given by President Buhari for this extension of the Joint Border Operations, codenamed Exercise Swift Response, they call it, which has necessitated the total shutdown of land boundaries. In line with the president's new order, the land borders are now going to be reopened, as we said, on January 31st. 2020, sealing the expectations of industrialists in the West African region who were hopeful that the Nigerian government would reopen the borders on or before Christmas. Of course, it's coming up to the Christmas period, and that makes it even more difficult for a lot of people. And yes, we know there are pros and cons to the closure of our land borders, and the federal government has now received some extra support for the closure till January 31st, 2020. But, Doctor, what is your take?
Well, I mean, clearly opinion is divided on the, reasonableness and the correctness of Nigeria's decision to continue to close its borders, land borders, against its neighbors. The government position is that this has been very profitable. The government claims that, Nigerian businesses have gained a lot. The CBN governor came up the other day to say that, look, rice producers in Nigeria have gained so much. He also said that, people involved in the poultry business, poultry farming, had also made a lot of gains. And the government consistently has said that there has been a reduction in terms of smuggling, particularly of rice. It has also been put out there that Nigeria has, within the period that the borders have been closed, gained as much as 23 billion naira in terms of savings. However, the question remains. It doesn't matter what, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria says or what NASIMA says, They may be looking out in terms of their own interests. They may even be playing politics. It's very easy to talk in Nigeria, but who has taken a holistic view, of the entire decision by government to close all land borders? We know for a fact that there have also been reports of collusion between customs and immigration officials and smugglers, showing that, look, the decision to close all land borders has not really achieved the objective, okay? And the case of Jibia, a community in the northern part, of the country, has also been cited, where there is a lot of collusion. So whatever they say, who has measured the leakages, the wastages, the disruption of the strategy that has been adopted by government. So we keep hearing only one side of the story. So to say that businesses express support for federal government's extension of border closure is just one side of it. The Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, for example, insists in the same report, that this has been a counterproductive measure, and that businesses, particularly small and medium-scale enterprises, are suffering, and that cross-border trade is grossly affected. You will recall that when, an assessment of the ease of doing business contest in Nigeria was done by the World Bank. Yes, the World Bank said Nigeria has improved, but the World Bank also pointed out that there is a crisis, with cross-border trade, and this is clearly an indication. However, what is more disturbing is the indication of a leaked memo from Customs saying that, look, even January 31, 2020 may not put an end to the closure of land borders. I think one Customs official, high-ranking, has also been reported as saying, China closed its borders for 40 years, and China gained from it. Now, some of these statements that we have out there in the public domain we seem to show a lack of understanding. I think that the Nigerian government should realize, as has been pointed out by the experts and by those who are involved in cross-border trade, that this is not a sustainable strategy. Okay? So we're just being told one side of the story. What are we doing about automation? What are we doing about, checking corruption in customs and immigration? Exactly. What are we doing about providing the necessary facilities,
and technology.
And technology. Yeah, that's what I meant by automation, to control our borders. So this tunnel view, ostrich view, the challenge of smuggling is at variance with the modern methods that are adopted. And there have been many complaints about how customs and immigration officials are behaving, even in the presence of this regime that is in place. Now, the point is made in these stories about how government is hoping that this closure will continue until government achieves its objectives. When will government achieve its objectives? 40 years, as one customs chief
China
has said, or something much earlier.
Absolutely, and
and they must take note of the criticisms, that have been pointed out, and observations that have been made by persons, stakeholders, who are involved in this. So to keep coming out every day and be propagandizing over the subject, I think doesn't make sense to me.
Absolutely
That's my
not.
opinion.
I completely agree with you, Doctor, and it is starting to look like this is their tunnel vision and the only way they think they can solve a problem that they are very far from solving with their current methods. But we will see where this entire situation leads us. Moving on to our next headline, organized labor in the country have asked State House of Assemblies to impeach governors that failed to pay the new minimum wage. Now, the General Secretary of the NLC, the Nigeria Labour Congress, Emmanuel Ugboaja, made the appeal while speaking to journalists on Sunday in Lagos. Now, Ugboaja is quoted as saying the following: "It is criminal to say you cannot pay the new minimum wage. Some of these leaders ride in private jets so they can pay," end quote. Now, he said the organized labor was in support of the return of the Labor Advisory Council, which would help to mediate between the government and their workers. He also asked the federal government to take actions against employers that are not paying the new minimum wage. So Ugboaja has come out to state that state governors who do not pay up to the new minimum wage should be impeached. What is your take on the way the NLC are going around the entire issue now with the states?
Well, clearly everybody in the Nigeria Labour Congress or within the hierarchy of labor is seeing this as an opportunity to make a statement.
Yeah.
The leadership of organized labor, they've already said that, one, the implementation of the minimum wage is a matter of law. Two, they have said at their Enugu meeting of the Joint Negotiating Council that they will provide a template for state branches of organized labor to negotiate with the governors. Three, they have said that, look, organized labor would go to court on behalf of any, branch in any of the states where it is seen that the governor is not serious about implementation. Four, they have made it clear that the matter of law refers to the minimum wage of 30,000 naira, right?
Yeah.
And that what is at stake is the consequential adjustment across the country. These are the issues. Now, this Ugboaja, who is General Secretary, is he speaking for the leadership of the Nigeria Labour Congress, or is just making a statement of his own? Whatever it is, we do not know. But he's saying, let us look at what he has said on its merit. He says, for example, that any governor that does not pay minimum wage or whatever it is, consequential adjustment will be impeached. Does Labour have the power to get the State House of Assembly to impeach a governor? The matter of impeachment is within the purview of the function of the State House of Assembly. And we all know that across the country, across the states, these state houses of assembly, they are largely, more or less, under the control of the governor of the state.
Yeah.
Right? They are like appendages of the executive. So if the General Secretary of the NLC is saying that he's probably making just an emotional ineffectual statement. That's one point in response to him. The second point that he made about a Labour Advisory Council. Yes, a Labour Advisory Council will maybe a very good thing so that, there will be constant dialogue between Labour and the executive. And I think that is something that we cannot quarrel with. However, the states, in response to all of these issues, have made it very clear that, yes, they will pay the minimum wage, but they will also negotiate on the basis of their capacity to pay with regard to the consequential adjustment. And if indeed we're running a federal system, I think, the governors are in a good position and they are they are quite right to say that, look, they will negotiate what it is. What the template that Labour will bring to guide this, they have not made clear. So, and Labour must be organized in their communication with the public. Every official in NLC cannot just be coming out and be making statements.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you on that, Doctor. And on that note, let's go on a very quick commercial break. And as soon as we're back, the headlines continue. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching the morning show here on Arise News, and we're still looking at some news headlines of today. Now, the Defense Headquarters over the weekend rallied support from the public for the controversial Operation Positive Identification that we've also discussed on the show, saying that it was launched to track fleeing terrorists and not necessarily to violate human rights of Nigerians. Now, besides this optimistic and quicker end to the insurgency of northeast of the country following the acquisition of helicopter gunships, which are going to give it a monopoly of aerial power over the insurgents and also change the tide in favor of the military. It also described the killing of the leader of the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, ISIS, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, by U.S. Special Forces as a sign that terrorists in the northeast of the country are not invincible and that they would be extinguished if the military is given adequate support. So the military have come out to speak on Operation Positive Identification and also to comment on the killing of al-Baghdadi, saying that it kind of proves that Boko Haram are not invincible. What is your take on this?
Well, the military is asking for, funding support. I don't think we can quarrel with that. Already we have been told that the percentage that is allotted to defense in the 2020 budget proposal for defense is really small. So if they're asking for funding, that's not a problem because they have a strategic assignment to defend the territorial integrity of Nigeria. If they're asking for the support of civilians, in the pursuit of terrorism and insurgency, to check it, to degrade it, to bring, the perpetrators to book, we have no problem with that. 3, if they are saying that the killing of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi shows that, terrorists are not invincible, they probably also have a point there, But do they have the kind of logistics at the disposal of the U.S. Special Forces, or do they have the kind of determination that the Americans continue to demonstrate in terms of their engagement in many theaters of war? But on the question of Operation Positive Identification, I think that the Nigerian Army is handling this very badly, and they need to be told the truth. For more than 1 week, there was an outrage against the indication that as part of its internal security operations, that the Army will now be involved in the checking of identity cards, driver's licenses, all over the country. Now, the Senate took up the matter, protested. The House of Reps took up the matter, protested. Even asked, the National Assembly even asked the Commander-in-Chief, President Buhari, to call the Nigerian Army to order not to engage in an usurpation of the job of both the police and the immigration, and not to embark on shady rules of engagement that could result in abuse of human rights. Civil society groups also protested. Femi Falana, SAN, went to a Lagos High Court and filed a case against the Nigerian Army on the grounds of Section 35 of the 1999 Constitution and Section 6 of the African People's Charter on Human Rights. Now, all of that happened for more than a week. The Nigerian military did not deem it necessary to provide necessary clarification until Saturday. So there is a problem in terms of communication. Yeah. And when they eventually spoke up, what did they say? They said there was one group called the BRICS Company, a fictitious company, to use their phrase, or to use Sagi Musa's phrase, that was going about saying that the army will do this, check identification and all that. But at the end of the day, the communication from the military was again incompetent, totally incompetent, because they merely reaffirmed that there is in place an Operation Positive Identification that is linked to Operation Lafayette in the northeastern part of the country. And they claim that this is intelligence-driven, this is data-driven. But when you look at it, even the explanation that they offered was of no help. They say, yes, it's targeted at bandits. Okay, what is their response to the allegation that this will be nationwide? So I think that the Nigerian Army must take a second look at its communication processes. Absolutely. It must learn to act proactively, when issues like this come up. And of course, whatever shape the Operation Positive Identification that the Nigerian Army has admitted, whatever shape it takes, it must not, the rules of engagement must be properly defined. It must not extend to the violation of the rights, the individual rights of Nigerians. And beyond that, we also expect that, the involvement of the Nigerian Army in internal security operations, as provided for in a limited sense under Section 217 of the Constitution, Section 8, subsection 1 of the Armed Forces Act, and Section 305 of the 1999 Constitution, will exist only in a limited sense. And it will not extend as far as, usurping the mandate of the Nigeria police and the immigration authorities. Absolutely. If we need proper policing and we need proper internal security, we should strengthen the police and other internal security agencies, and the army, or the military generally, should also be empowered to pursue their mandate as properly defined under the Constitution and the Armed Forces Act.
Absolutely. And of course, be rest assured that when we have better communication from the DHQ, we will bring you the updates here on the show. But over to the U.S., where Donald Trump has threatened to cut U.S. funding to California for aid during the wildfires that have burned across the state during the dry winds of this fall. Trump tweeted earlier that California Governor Gavin Newsom has done a terrible job of forest management, he said. And he told reporters that the majority of the issues were down to mismanagement. Let's take a closer look.
You got fires eating away at California every year because management is so bad. The governor doesn't know. He's like a child. He doesn't know what he's doing. And I've been telling him this for 2 years. They've got to take care of it. Every year, it's always California. It's rarely somebody else or someplace else. But Nancy Pelosi ought to go back to her district and take care of it, because her district has become a mess. #1 in the country for going down. All she thinks about is impeachment, but she doesn't want to impeach. You know who wants to impeach? The people that run the party, the radical left.
Okay, so once again, we have Donald Trump on a rampage, and he seems to be politicizing what is a natural disaster that is overtaking California right now. I don't really understand his point of view, Doctor, do you?
Well, what is happening in California is a tragedy. Over 100,000 acres of land, have been affected, either in the Maria fire or the Kincaid fire. And California wildfires have become a regular occurrence. The received wisdom is that during winter, wet winter, that, wildfires would reduce, particularly with the impact of jet stream. Yeah. But this has not been the case since 1977. Since 1977, scientific research had indicated a deterioration, a progression in terms of wildfires in California. Last year, which was the most destructive Californian wildfire, Southern California to be specific, resulted in the death of 86 persons. Now, this year, we have witnessed it again. And the explanation for it is climate change. The winds, the weather gets drier, the forests get drier, and then you have repeated incidents, of wildfires in California. Now, what this background shows is that the comments that have been made by President Trump show a lack of understanding on his part of the science behind the situation in, explaining the California wildfires. Yeah. And of course, I think Gavin Newsom, the Democratic governor of California, made a point when he said, look, President Trump, you don't believe in climate change anyway.
Exactly.
So you are excused from this conversation.
Yeah.
But who can excuse an aggressive fellow like Trump from any conversation? He has his phone at his disposal, and he can go on Twitter and rant endlessly. So he's threatening now to withhold aid from California in terms of support. I think that the electorate in the United States should know this very carefully, because this is not about politics, and President Trump is taking a partisan position on this matter. And you can see him also referring to Nancy Pelosi, who he has been abusing. So this is another instance of President Trump not acting presidential. And I think that, someone should explain the science to him. Maybe we should invite Greta Thunberg, the young lady, to help explain to President Trump that, the politics of the presidency should be driven by knowledge and decorum rather than partisanship.
Exactly. It may actually take a 16-year-old young lady for him to understand that. Let's take one final story. 2 people are said to be in a critical condition in Hong Kong following a weekend of clashes with anti-government protesters, as China called for a tougher stance to end months and months of unrest that has engulfed the financial hub. Riot police stormed several shopping malls yesterday, and this was including City Plaza that was packed with families and children in the eastern suburb of Taikoo Shing. A man with a knife slashed several people and apparently bit off part of the ear of a politician. The wounded included a man believed to be the knife wielder, whom protesters had beaten with sticks, and further demonstrations are planned for this week as protesters keep up the pressure for demands, including independent inquiries into police behavior and also the adoption of universal suffrage. So unrest has sparked again over the weekend in Hong Kong, and we're seeing some extremely terrifying reports here. A man biting off the ear of a politician, people being knifed down in numbers, and the financial hub is taking a huge slump, Doctor.
Well, Hong Kong is suffering a lot from this. Hong Kong is the financial hub of the region. The stock market is affected. The economy is suffering. Retail business has more or less collapsed. Tourism has reduced. But what stands out in these 5 months of protest is the resolve, the determination of the ordinary people of Hong Kong, who are insisting on 5 demands. Even on Halloween, they decided to wear masks to push their demand for universal suffrage, for the disclassification of the protest as riots, for the resignation of Carrie Lam. But China is proving very difficult. We don't know when this will end. Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. Let's go on a very quick commercial break, and as soon as we're back, the conversations do continue. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching the morning show here on Horizon News. And before we head over to our Abuja studios for our first conversation of the day, let's take one more story on our news headlines today. Now, the Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and the presidents of Cuba too, Miguel Diaz-Canel, hit out at the U.S. government during a summit in Havana. The Cuban president accused Donald Trump of attacking the Cuban Revolution and stoking unrest in Latin America. Now, Maduro addressed the crowd, saying violent street protests in Chile and Ecuador and in other countries are the direct result of U.S. policy supported by international institutions like the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. Let's take a look.
The stupid government of the United States and the imbeciles of some countries say what is happening in Ecuador and Chile and in Brazil is caused by the Sao Paulo Forum, by Maduro, by Raul, saying Raul is the super mustache. No, Chile is the fault of Pinochet, not Maduro. The International Monetary Fund is to blame, and the people have the right to rebel and look for alternatives.
So Maduro completely slammed the U.S. at the summit, and I mean, his anger is kind of justified. I guess the anger of a lot of people in his position right now is kind of justified. But Doctor, let's get your take quickly.
No, I mean, the reaction of the Cuban president and Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela is understandable. There's never been any love lost between, Venezuela in recent times and Cuba since the Bay of Pigs invasion between Cuba and the United States. And the fight is mainly ideological.
Yeah.
And both countries, have economic blockade, sanctions imposed on them, by the United States. And in the case of Venezuela, a country that is oil rich, you will recall that during the supposed re-election of Nicolas Maduro last year, the president of the National Assembly insisted, that's Juan Guaido, insisted that he is a legitimate winner. And he's been supported by the United States. And the United States has not only blocked Venezuela in terms of its oil and gas resources, but also in terms of assets in the United States.
Yeah.
So, but we should not say that this is a case of sour grapes on the part of Venezuela and Cuba. We should also worry about the ambivalent, foreign policy approach of the United States to both Venezuela and Cuba. But it's important to take a special look at Venezuela, a country that is oil-rich, but which has been, mismanaged to such an extent that today over 3 million of its citizens are fleeing in all directions. And then, there is a shortage of virtually everything, including food and medicine, in a country that was once a prosperous country. But other countries of the world, like Norway, and other countries in Europe, have tried to intervene. But, the negative attitude of the United States continues to impact on these two countries and generate humanitarian crisis in both Venezuela, Cuba, and, as they pointed out, in other countries in Latin America.
Absolutely, Doctor.